to This Week in the Clinic. I'm so excited for this week's episode because I got Alissa Hamilton here with me. This week we're going to be getting into some really great material. Just start by introducing my guest, but before I do, I just want to welcome you to This Week in the Clinic, where I take the lessons I learn throughout the week with working with clients, and I bring them to you so you can benefit from them. Now, there's a couple topics that I cover so often with my clients, so that's why I'm so excited to be talking about these topics today. We're going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to blow your mind with some of the facts and figures we give you, and I'm sure you'll walk away with some really good tidbits of information here. So, first I want to introduce Alissa. She's a prolific writer. She's got a PhD from Yale University. And also a law degree from U of T. She's appeared on the Dr. Oz show and also on TEDx in Cambridge here. It's a town here in Toronto.
Oh, actually, no, in Boston.
In Boston. All right, okay. She's been on ABC World News with Diane Sawyer. Pardon?
Massachusetts, yeah.
Massachusetts, okay. Has been featured on The Guardian, The Atlantic, NewYorker.com, The New York Post, The Los Angeles Times, The Boston Globe, Wired. She's been on NPR and Martha Stewart Living Radio. And she's the author of 2 amazing books, which are always on my bookshelf. It's going to be backwards to you, I think, but Got Milked and Squeezed. Thanks for coming.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right. So, first of all, we've got a picture here of David Beckham. Look at that sexy man. And he's got one of those milk mustaches. Yeah, so, drinking milk must be cool and must do you a body good. What do you think about that?
I think we should have Carl Lewis there, who actually, I don't remember when he said it, but he said that his best running years were when he went vegan, but obviously milk was one of the things that he stopped drinking. Right. So this is the idea that we have, that we need milk to look like this, and if we saw more photos of other major athletes who don't drink milk, we might not be so easily convinced that this is what we need to be strong,
right,
and mighty.
Right. And I actually looked it up, and I believe in the early 90s, that's when they started the Got Milk, or the Got Milk
right.
campaign. Yeah.
I wish it was the Got Milked.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to read actually what it says on this advertisement, and that's going to open up, I think, a can of worms where we can start to chip away at. So it says, heads up, the protein in milk helps build muscle, and some studies suggest teens who choose it tend to be leaner. Staying active, eating right, and drinking 3 glasses a day of low-fat and fat-free milk helps you look great. So grab a glass and get in the game.
Well, and this is the thing, right away, low-fat, non-fat. I mean, that's a highly processed, it's essentially what you're getting when you take the fat out is sugar water. And so the companies then fortify the milk with vitamin A and vitamin D, which are fat-soluble nutrients. I mean, this is all information you know. So how sensible is it to be... They advertise milk as a good source of these nutrients like vitamin A, vitamin D, and these are fat-soluble vitamins and so nutrients. So on the one hand, they're telling you, drink no fat, low fat, and then it's a good source of these fat-soluble nutrients. So that's one senseless dietary advice, the recommendations. But again, 3 glasses a day. I can go into that dietary recommendation, which was set so long ago, and it's not evidence-based. And things have changed from when the recommendations were first set. Things have changed in terms of the demographics. most of the world is lactose intolerant. Intolerant, we know that, and we can get into that. So things have changed in terms of our nutrition knowledge. We now know, we have actually, out of the Harvard School of Public Health, Dr. Walter Willett, questioning our calcium recommendations. Well, the 3 glasses a day of milk is essentially 1,000 milligrams, close to 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day, which is what the calcium recommendations are. Coincidence? I don't think so. So we have these calcium recommendations that support the 3 servings a day of dairy recommendation. The dairy recommendation also, you know, of course, I don't know which came first, which non-evidence-based recommendation came first. But so we have Dr. Walter Willett even questioning why our calcium recommendations are so high, that we should be lowering our calcium recommendations and raising those for vitamin D so that there's more of a balance. And things have changed in terms of the diseases we're suffering from. So, you know, a lot of the chronic diseases that we have now have a lot to do with our sugar intake. 3 glasses a day of milk, even unflavored milk. 1 glass has about naturally occurring 12 grams of naturally occurring sugar.
Wow.
And that's the equivalent of about 3 teaspoons. So 3 glasses a day, you're getting a lot of sugar.
9 teaspoons.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of sugar. And when you say sugar and milk, people are going to think, like, where's the sugar coming from?
Right.
Yeah, so what sugar are you talking about in milk?
And then we get back to the lactose intolerance issue. So lactose is the sugar, and there are now, it's just a known fact that around 70% of the world population is lactose intolerant. Break that down, 50 to 80% of Hispanics, 60 to 80% of African Americans and Ashkenazi Jews, and almost 100% of Native First Nation people and Asian Americans are lactose intolerant. And I don't even like that term because it sounds like those of us, the majority of the world that that can't drink milk beyond when can't digest lactose beyond when we're babies, which is when, you know, we're designed to be drinking milk. That we're the ones that have a disease, that there's an issue with. When in fact, those who can digest the lactose in milk are actually, as I mentioned, in a minority, mostly descendants of a small group of farmers who were born with a mutation that enabled them to digest the lactose in milk beyond babies. So they're technically this enzyme is called lactase, and technically they're lactase persistent, and they're really the freaks of nature. It's the majority of the world that are lactase impersistent. So that's a more correct term to, you know, of what the issue is. So yeah, you asked the simple question, what's the sugar in milk, and the simple answer is lactose, but there are all kinds of problems with that sugar.
Right. Well,
in particular.
You've really confused me today, and I'll tell you why you confused me.
Because of the...
I'm just totally blown away.
Canada's Health Guide.
Because on the Canada Food Guide, and in many countries, actually I went to the UN website, and they have this resource where you can look up any food guide from any country. It's really cool, actually. So I know a lot of countries have similar sentiments.
Right, they all mimic North America.
Yeah, and right here in the blue section, we're supposed to have, and I have my other trusty guide as part of the guide, milk and alternatives, we're supposed to have the average person about 2 servings. So why would Health Canada tell me that I'm supposed to have 2 servings of dairy if 70% of the world can't even digest it? And I like to say that here in Toronto, very multicultural, right?
Well, and this is the thing, in the most recent dietary guidelines, there were hearings, and there was a physician from Baltimore testifying that for the U.S., and it's similar, Canada and the U.S. are virtually the same, to continue to encourage large part, to encourage everybody to consume a product that is making the majority of the population sick, is he actually called it a form of institutionalized racism. So, as I mentioned, things have changed. We have recommendations that just are out of date and they're not evidence-based, and they don't. The calcium recommendations are more also confusing the situation, because we think that the World Health Organization minimum calcium recommendation is 500 milligrams. Countries with the lowest calcium intake, around 500 milligrams, Hong Kong and Singapore, are also have the lowest incidence of bone fractures. Whereas countries with the highest, and in the US it's averaging around 1,000 milligrams, we top the charts in bone fractures. So we have been led to believe that you need all this calcium to build strong bones and prevent fractures, when in fact, as I mentioned, things have changed now, and we are coming out of Harvard School of Public Health. We have this information that are neither the dairy recommendations nor the calcium recommendations are evidence-based, and I will just keep hitting that home. The idea that we have, I challenged the food group on the dairy food group on so many
there it is again.
for so many reasons, because it's the only, I have used this analogy often. There's so many nutrients that are essential for building strong bones: magnesium, vitamin K, vitamin D, potassium. All of these other nutrients were told by Health Canada and in the US by the USDA to get these nutrients from a variety of sources. Not so when it comes to calcium. As I mentioned, the calcium recommendation, the dairy food group is essentially set up so that you get all your calcium from one food, and that's cow's milk.
Right.
When it says alternatives, the only alternative in the USDA's dairy food group is calcium fortified soy milk. That's the only alternative. So the idea is if you're vegan, I guess, you have this option of a fortified food. There's no education about the numerous sources of calcium in really healthy foods that are actually more, the calcium, for instance, in broccoli, bok choy, kale, even the National Dairy Council in the U.S., NDC, they have a guide that says that the fractional absorption of calcium in those three vegetables is higher than in milk, even.
Wow.
They recognize that, but they say it's a matter of convenience and palatability, that it's just convenient to drink milk. Well, we don't have, it may be convenient to get all your protein from hamburgers, but we don't have a beef food group because it's convenient to have, to get all your protein from hamburgers. And so, in back, I was going to mention the analogy that I also often use. I started to say that there's so many nutrients that we need for strong bones. Calcium isn't the only one. Again, this is emphasizing that this is an outdated science, old science. We know so much more now. We don't have a pumpkin seed food group because pumpkin seeds are high in magnesium, and most North Americans are deficient in magnesium. So it just doesn't make sense to have all your, it creates a hierarchy of not only food, cow's milk being at the center, but also of one nutrient, calcium. It's totally imbalanced. It doesn't make sense. I really actually like you mentioned other food guides throughout the world. Well, one that we should be following more closely is Brazil's. They don't single out one single foods for nutrients. They suggest they divide or give recommendations based on how processed the food is. So they suggest that you consume minimally processed foods and try to avoid highly processed foods like skimmed, low-fat, milk that has been stripped of all of its natural properties. And they also say be skeptical of advertisements. Where, here we're part of the problem. This is essentially an advertisement for the dairy industry.
Right. Yeah, and that's a bit scary that all of these big industries actually control what people are eating.
Exactly.
You go around the grocery store and a lot of it is just driven by big food.
Right.
Yeah. So just for those of you who are joining us live, if you know someone who's going to benefit from this information, tag them, share it with your followers, and just give us a good old thumbs up if you're enjoying the information. We're also watching for any questions, so if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. And I'd love to know if anyone out there has eliminated dairy for any reason, and if they have, tell us why in the comment box. I think that would be a really great thing to chat about.
Can I just add one thing
Sure.
about the food guide? I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting this isn't another, trendy thing to be, or restrictive diet. I'm not saying everyone needs to cut out dairy from their diet, but it doesn't make sense that we're being told that we need 3 servings of dairy a day. So my suggestion has always been get rid of the dairy food group and move dairy products that are high in protein and low in added sugars to the protein group, which is how the industry is advertising dairy these days anyways. It's a good source of protein.
Right.
So it becomes an option, not a requirement. That's all I'm saying, so that you can determine whether it works for you or not. If you're not lactose intolerant, if you're not concerned about, there are some studies that question the wonder food that we've come to believe it to be, but if it works for you, then that's fine, but to make it an option rather than a requirement.
Right. Okay, cool. And so I think we've established that this, by the way, this is Alyssa's book, Got Milked, love the title. And I think we've established that milk probably isn't the greatest thing. What about products of dairy, like yogurt, kefir, butter, ghee, and even going into more of like a therapeutic role, things like colostrum. Not sure if you can speak on that. Yeah.
All interesting questions. I actually, one of the first interviews I did was in Amsterdam, of all places. They're definitely high dairy consumers, and I said right away I had yogurt for breakfast, and kefir is actually one of my favorite. I look for any dairy that I consume. I look for products that are coming from sustainable farms and smaller scale. I mean, that's part of the problem, is there's this trend towards, in fact, in the U.S., the dairy operations that are growing the fastest are the ones with 1,000 cows or more. And that's still happening now, even with our awareness about all the problems. The Obama administration singled out the dairy industry as key in their climate action plan to reduce that. The government wanted, I'm sure this is gone now, long gone, but with the dairy industry, and the dairy industry in particular, to cut down greenhouse gas emissions by 25% by 2020, because of the methane that is produced. And not only methane, with these large farms, the manure is seeping into the groundwater, contaminating the groundwater with nitrates, so that in areas where there's high level, where there's Wisconsin, California, where they have a lot of these dairy operations, the school, I actually saw photos of the water coming out of the taps in the schools. They can't drink the water because it's so contaminated with nitrates, so all they really can drink is milk. So I diverted to your questions about, there are plenty of, first of all, sustainable operations. So if you're going to be consuming yogurt, kefir, any dairy product. But I was thinking also of, there was recently a study, 2014, that was published in the British Medical Journal, tracking over 100,000 men and women for an average of 20 years. They found that the women who drank the most milk, so this is milk, not the other products that you're referring to, 3 glasses or more of milk a day were 60% more likely to suffer fractures, bone fractures, twice as likely to die over the course of the study, but specifically 90% more likely to die of cardiovascular disease, and close to 50%, 44%, something like that, to die of cancer. Yet, this is from drinking milk, yet those who consumed yogurt, they didn't notice this effect. So they suspect that, and this is back to the lactose issue, they suspect that the reason is milk, as we discussed, is very high in lactose. This is unflavored milk. I don't even ask me about flavored milk. So unflavored milk, I will answer my question just quickly because I can't resist.
Yeah.
But a glass of unflavored milk has the equivalent of 3 teaspoons of naturally occurring sugar, this lactose. Flavored milk, add another 3 teaspoons to that, so chocolate strawberry milk, which is essentially the equivalent of a glass of Coke. But so the researchers in this British Medical Journal study, the Swedish study, suspect that the reason those who consumed yogurt weren't seeing these same effects is that the lactose in sugar, the lactose in milk, when it breaks down into a highly inflammatory sugar called degalactose. And this actually, all lab technicians know, if you want to age your rats, you inject them with degalactose.
Oh, interesting.
So they want to do more research into whether this is the reason. But when you're consuming a product like yogurt or kefir, most of the lactose is already being broken down, and so that's why they think that they don't see the same results with these fermented dairy products, which is how we consume dairy forever until. The history of how we started drinking milk fresh is a whole other story. But that your question about other products, that's certainly what we have. We seem to be able to digest better, just genetically, and how we've developed as humans, how we've evolved.
Yeah,
we've
for
evolved
sure.
To be able to.
Yeah. So it's a similar story with processed foods, right? When we take the parts apart or we process it in a certain way. So like milk usually is a processed food, right? It's pasteurized, it's cooked, that fat is skimmed off, and then we're bringing in these synthetic vitamins and minerals.
And even whole milk that you buy in the store, unless then this is why I say it's really good to know where exactly your milk is coming from, because if it's just thrown into a big batch, they're getting milk from all over. So even if you buy whole milk, the milk is being stripped of all the fat first and then added back in the industrialized milk.
A similar story to orange juice,
yes.
which we're going to talk about in a moment if you guys stay with us. What about devil's advocate? What about raw milk from happy cows?
Yeah, well, my preference is always going with the Brazilian recommendation of minimally processed. I would never recommend to anybody. You have to be you have to be careful, and you have to know your source. But this is actually an interesting question, because I started to mention the history of how why we're drinking fluid milk, just fresh milk, rather than these fermented products that you were referring to. And actually, the butter issue is another interesting. I can go on all kinds of different, so I got to keep straight. But so what was I going to say about the
about like raw milk?
Oh, raw milk. That's right. So really, thank you. So you got to keep me in mind. So back when the government was trying to figure out how to regulate the consumption of fresh milk, there were two routes. One was pasteurization, and the other was having a certification program so that you'd have physicians going to the farms certifying the milk to be sure that it was okay, and so there was pasteurization or raw certified. And most of the physicians were lobbying for the certification route, but it was just too costly. The government, it was easier from a safety and cost perspective to just have all the milk pasteurized and have that as a requirement. So, you know, if you know your farmer and you know where you're getting it from, I always prefer just with food in general. The less processed, the better, because you're getting all the nutrients and that were originally there, and of course the freshest. And but you have to do your due diligence.
Right. Okay. So summary. Pasteurized, processed milk by the glass that they recommend we should have 2 or 3 glasses depending on where you're from. Probably not the best thing. We talked about all the evidence today. You can go back and check that out if you missed it.
And the calcium recommendations.
And the calcium.
Remember that the government, the Dairy Food Group guidelines are based on calcium recommendations that are not evidence-based. The 500 milligram per day minimum that the World Health Organization recommends is, we just haven't internalized that.
Yeah, and everyone's so obsessed about the calcium. Like, the reductionist view that we need that one specific nutrient.
And also that if you are vegan, or if you don't, the sort of assumption in the Dairy Food Group is if you don't drink milk, you are vegan, and you need a calcium fortified food. But there are plenty. So I'm sorry, I have to squeeze this in.
Go for it.
But
yeah, it's important.
Dry ground basil. First of all, dried herbs, amazing sources of all kinds of nutrients. Most of them are very high in calcium, ounce for ounce, dried ground basil. And this is actually I have to squeeze this in and go too, because I did an interview, CTV I'm sorry, do I have time to?
Oh, we got lots of time, yeah.
So CTV did an interview on the book and was challenging most of what I was saying, and they had a nutritionist come on, and so I had said that dried ground basil, 2 tablespoons, have the equivalent about just over 200 milligrams of calcium. So that's about the same amount as in a glass of milk, and 2 tablespoons of dried ground basil.
Love that one.
So so the nutritionist, I think she was from McMaster, I can't remember which university, but a supposedly reputable professional. So I've never heard of calcium in dried basil. I didn't make this up. You can look it up.
Right.
So that's the point. The point is that the Dairy Food Group doesn't give any indication of all of the calcium in many of the foods that are really healthy that we're not eating enough of, like fruits and vegetables. We're all told we need to eat more fruits and vegetables, yet there's no education about the nutrients in these foods, like calcium, bok choy, kale, broccoli, all very high in calcium. And then I have questions, well, how much do you have to eat? I just showed you before we came in that I was just shopping, and the nutrition on the back of the package, in 1 cup of soy sprouts, there's 420 milligrams of calcium, which is you're almost meeting the World Health Organization minimum. In 1 cup of sprouts take up a lot of room. It's not hard to consume. So
Right.
I had to squeeze that in. That there are plenty of sources, and we have been led to believe that dairy is the only source of calcium. If not dairy, then something like soy milk made to
Right.
imitate
Right.
milk.
And to illustrate that point even more, a calf, gets weaned off of milk.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
And then they make milk
Right.
with lots of calcium. So where are they getting their calcium?
Right, exactly.
And they eat
Grass.
lots of green leafy vegetables, this thing called
Yeah.
grass.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
they don't drink milk their whole life.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important point that,
And
and you get all those other nutrients that help to incorporate the
Right.
calcium into the body.
And the balance too.
Right.
But when I was researching squeeze, this goes back to orange juice.
Right. Good segue.
Well, so somebody I was talking to was saying this calcium fortified orange juice.
Right.
What's that all? He was in the industry. He was saying it's ridiculous. We know that they actually have to be careful because they give they grind all the byproducts, the waste products of orange juice into pellets to feed cattle. And they have to be careful about the calcium fortified orange juice. They can't give it to the cows because if the cows, we know vets know a lot about animal nutrition, and we know that you can't give cows that much calcium, that it's unhealthy for the cows. And so this researcher was saying, we know not to give cows all this calcium, and yet we're telling pregnant women to drink calcium fortified orange juice. That we just don't see, we're very siloed in how we
Right.
do things anyways.
Right. Okay. Well, let's talk about Squeeze. This is actually your first book, 2009.
That's right.
Yeah, 2009 she published Squeezed. What you don't know about orange juice, and it's another food item that we've been sold. As I look outside the window here in our cold Toronto, that's trying really hard to warm up, I don't see any orange trees.
No.
Yeah.
This is the only way you can get vitamin C. Milk's the only way you can get calcium.
Exactly. So, I was reading that your book actually inspired some class action lawsuits. Is that true?
Yeah.
I didn't know about that. Can you tell me a little bit?
They're ongoing for, actually it was a lawyer who read Squeezed and contacted me, and then there was just a whole bunch of lawsuits that were filed, and they consolidated them all into one. And so there's a lawsuit against Coke, which is, their brand is Simply Orange, and Pepsi. So this is the soda wars, but in orange juice. Pepsi's product is Tropicana.
Right.
So essentially for deceptive advertising,
Right.
because we have been led to believe that orange juice is a fresh, simple, straight from the tree, almost fresh squeezed product, and that's not what we're getting.
So it's not when it says 100% orange juice on the container?
Well, technically, I suppose.
Give us, I know the story. Give us the quick rundown of how orange juice is actually made.
Okay, well, and this is not from concentrate. I'm going to give you the rundown from not from concentrate, because that's the one that we pay more for because we think it's a fresher product. So what they do is they strip the orange juice of oxygen so that it doesn't, this is aside from pasteurization, not from concentrate, it's essentially pasteurized juice. It's a ready-to-serve juice. So they strip the juice of oxygen, and when you strip it of oxygen, you also strip it of the flavor-providing chemicals that are natural to the juice. They do this so that, because they then store it in these huge million-gallon aseptic storage tanks. And that's what aseptic storage is, essentially. You're stripping the juice of the oxygen. And And so when the juice comes out of the tank, it has no flavor of orange juice. So they then hire flavor and fragrance companies, the same ones that make high-end perfumes and cologne, to add flavor back to the juice to make it taste fresh. Well, so you asked, is it really 100% orange juice? Well, these flavor packs are derived from the orange essence and oils, but what they do now is they break down those orange essence and oils into the individual chemicals, and then they mix and match so that each company has its signature flavor. I actually spoke to a flavorist, and he was saying they have customers, so orange juice companies coming to them and saying, can you make our orange juice taste like Tropicana? So they're not asking for orange juice that tastes like orange juice anymore even. It's, can we have an orange juice that tastes like one of these processed flavors? So, and then the question is, well, these flavor packs, or what is that flavor and what are these chemicals? And orange is one of the most complex flavors. So again, I talked to somebody in the flavor industry, and he said, if we could mimic the flavor of a fresh squeeze of orange, that's like the holy grail of flavors. There are hundreds of chemicals that make up the flavor of an orange. So again, it's one of the most complex flavors. And so what they have discovered, for instance, with Tropicana, they've discovered that one chemical, ethyl butyrate, is what North Americans associate most with the flavor of a fresh squeezed orange. So they highlight that chemical in their flavor packs. Whereas in other countries, they have different palettes. They might highlight a different chemical. But the flavor packs look like nothing you find in nature. I mean, and you can taste it. I mean, the taste, if you have a glass of fresh squeezed orange juice and a glass of Tropicana, you can taste, you can smell the difference right away. So it's not a naturally occurring formula. It's something that has been highly engineered. So whatever your favorite brand of orange juice is, what you're liking is this flavor pack, because as I mentioned, going back to these tanks, when the juice comes out of the tank, it tastes like sugar water. There's no flavor.
It's amazing because we have an epidemic of obesity, we have an epidemic of diabetes, and a lot of, the two products we're talking about today, milk, which becomes sugar water, and orange juice, which is just sugar water, is just drinking calories.
18 grams of sugar in 8 ounces of orange juice.
18 grams. So people have their glass of orange juice first thing in the morning, and then they have their cereal, and they put their milk in, and their coffee with milk. And
I'm going to add back to the flavored milk. So I talked to, the dairy industry says, well, it's a convenient source of calcium that, people aren't going to eat enough broccoli or whatever other food it is to make up that calcium. Well, so I talked to the executive director of the Office of School Nutrition for Public Schools in Detroit, and she said she just wants funding to be able to give her kids water, to have water stations in the school, yet all she gets funding for is milk. And the kids won't, and they have to have no fat skim milk, as we mentioned, essentially sugar water, but they won't, she said plain skim milk, it tastes like wallpaper. The kids won't drink it. So even for breakfast, what they're pouring into their cereal is strawberry flavored
Oh my
milk.
God.
So there's you asked again back to this Beckham. And
we started with, to get your attention, we started with a half-naked picture of Beckham here.
And I suggested it.
Because I think most of my viewers are women as well. Anyone who's interested in health,
We could just have him there for the entire. So, but the skim milk recommendation, that essentially is saying flavored milk. Actually, I have to add this too. So they're in the USDA dietary guidelines, it says if you're lactose intolerant, try, first of all, I'm going to even take one step back, ice cream is part of the dairy food group in the US. So you can get your calcium, you can meet your calcium requirements with ice cream, but they also say if your child is lactose intolerant, try giving them chocolate milk. So what? Because it'll taste better for the second, so that you can get it into them, and then they'll feel sick later. So this recommendation of skim milk, low-fat milk is essentially a recommendation for flavored milk because as kids especially, and most people don't like the flavor of plain skim milk.
Right.
So that's why all the flavored milk, and so when you're then essentially recommending flavored milk, you're essentially recommending that you consume the same amount of sugar as Coke. So we realize that we need to get soda out of the schools, and yet we're pushing these flavored milks on kids
Right.
in school.
Right. Did you see Jamie Oliver's Food Revolution?
Was that a while ago? Did he?
It was,
said with
yeah.
the truck and they poured sugar. I remember
Yeah.
this one image.
Yeah.
but-
Well, he's done a TED Talk, I believe, where he did the sugar. He might have done it in the episode too, but I
Yeah.
mean, his first victory was getting flavored
Flavored
milk
milk.
out of the schools, and that took like a ton
Wow,
of
I
work.
can't imagine that happening in North America.
Mhm.
I mean, I've talked to people here, people in the States, as I mentioned, and
Yeah, yeah.
Betty Wiggins, of the, she is the head of school nutrition. She recognizes it, but she can't do anything. She just wants to give her kids water.
Right. Who is this?
Betty Wiggins,
Who you were talking
Executive Director of the Office of School Nutrition for Detroit Public Schools. It's quite a mouthful,
Yeah.
but she's a wonderful woman, and she's fighting for water.
Yeah. For water.
Imagine.
Yeah. So I think what we've learned here is that we don't necessarily, or we shouldn't necessarily believe what we're sold on TV. We shouldn't necessarily believe what we see on the billboards. Even though he is a strapping young gentleman, we can actually be healthy by not drinking milk and getting our nutrients in other ways.
There's a conflict of interest in having the USDA is authoring or publishing the dietary recommendations for Americans. They also are set up to promote agricultural commodities. There's a conflict of interest there.
Right.
Dairy is a highly lucrative product for the country.
Right.
So it's no surprise that they have become essentially this. They actually, the government is through. It's very confusing the advertising and marketing budgets, but essentially the government is behind that as well. The Got Milk campaign.
Right.
So they're advertising, and then in Brazil, you have the advice from the government saying be suspicious of advertising.
Right.
And here we have.
Right. I think I read somewhere or heard somewhere that in Brazil they're not allowed to even put up billboards with those types of advertising.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Which would be consistent
Makes
with what you're
sense.
telling me. Yeah, it makes total sense. So, anything you want to add about our discussion? No, I know you've had a lot. I'm sure you can speak for hours more. Any key things you want to add about our discussion today on milk or orange juice?
Just that neither are an essential, actually both are being promoted as an essential part of a balanced diet, and neither are essential. And all I am suggesting is that we be aware that we don't, with the dairy food group, when I say get rid of the dairy food group, I'm not telling everybody that they have to cut dairy out of their diets, but treat it as an option, not a requirement.
Yeah.
And certainly,
Great.
with orange juice, eat an orange. You get all the fiber, the bioflavonoids that help you assimilate the vitamin C. All of this is stripped. The pectin, which is also very healthy, all of that's stripped out of the juice, in addition to the flavor. And so actually companies now are adding all of this back to the juice. Well, just eat a whole orange in the first place.
Mhm.
Why,
Whole foods.
Yeah, whole foods.
The way nature intended.
Exactly.
And the reason why I wanted to interview you and highlight these books is because on This Week in the Clinic, we talk about what I talk about with my clients on a weekly basis. And this is one of the biggest food sensitivities and food allergies
Yes.
and problem foods for especially children, but people of all ages. And when you take the dairy out, you see tremendous healing take place
Right.
as one aspect. And then this, we just have a sugar addiction here in North America, and this is just extra sugar, which throws everyone's blood sugar off, increases inflammation, causes all sorts of problems.
And I can add, just again, you mentioned sensitivities, and back at the turn of, this is just to emphasize, I think it's hard for us to accept that these recommendations are not evidence-based. We don't, it has nothing to do with science. Back in around the turn of the century when we started, when the recommendations started coming out, recommendation was for children to drink a quart of milk a day. That's essentially 4 glasses of milk a day. Well, now we know pediatricians are saying that one of the most common problems they're seeing in their clinic is kids that are anemic because they're drinking too much milk. So we know now what we didn't, and so just to emphasize that what we're saying now is not evidence-based.
Yeah.
It's not, it just doesn't.
Absolutely, and you highlighted that actually in the first part of the book regarding iron deficiency and how it binds up iron.
Yeah.
So I interviewed you actually in 2013.
Was that what it was?
Yeah.
I remember it.
All about Squeezed. You had not written this yet, but near the end of our interview you said, oh, I've got something in the pipeline, something very exciting, and you said it was all about milk. I think you did tell me at that time. I was very excited to get my hands on it. What's your next one?
Well, and it's actually...
Sorry, just one more thing, because what it looks like you're doing here, Alissa, is disassembling the Canada Food Guide piece by piece. We've got our nice orange juice up here. We've got our nice milk down here in our dairy group.
Oh, and this is actually, I was thinking, well, water is kind of a natural next, but this actually reminds me that the Harvard School of Public Health, they have a healthy food plate that they say should, that's their recommendation instead of the guidelines, and instead of the blue glass representing dairy, they say should be water.
Water.
Love
it.
Yeah, so I like that too. But one of my passions, and I was going to mention whole foods, whole orange. I actually even eat the peel. It's so flavorful, and you talk about all the flavor that's stripped out.
Sure.
Well, food waste is something that it has always been just innately a passion of mine. I hate wasting any, and both of these products actually, waste has to do with, there's a big issue with waste, and especially with milk, the amount of milk that gets poured down the drains. If you go into schools, you can see full cartons in the trash. So I'd love to be able to prevent a lot of that.
Sounds great to me. I like where you're going with that. And I'll have to interview you again when that comes out.
Whole foods. No, don't throw it out. Eat it.
Yeah. So, where can people find you, if they can find you?
Right. I'm not on really any social media, but you can find me through you, I guess. I have email.
Yeah.
I don't even have a cell phone.
Okay. So you're disconnected.
Yeah.
That's the way I wish I could be. I'm sure it's nice.
The luxury of being a writer is I
Definitely.
don't really need any of that. So yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any particular way, but that's the natural question in this age is
Right.
there are usually a lot of sites to direct you to, but
For sure. So I guess the best place to go at the moment would be Amazon.
Oh, for the books, yes.
Or your bookstores,
Yeah.
because we can't find Alissa because she's disconnected. She's just writing her next book, which I love. But yeah, pick up these books if you want to dive deep into what it's all about. You can get them on Amazon.
Should I show you this is a special copy. The cover doesn't really look like this. Should I?
Sure, yeah. Do you have?
I do have one.
Okay. As she just grabs that, we covered a lot of great information. Thank you for your
you won't
comments.
be confused.
Yeah. Okay, great.
This is what you'll see, and
So that's the updated version without all that.
that was
writing.
a special copy just for Josh.
This is a little bit cleaner, yeah. So this is the Got Milk. Check it out, Amazon, totally available. Squeezed, that was the first one. Another great one, all about orange juice. Pick them up. I think they're great little studies on how big food really tries to influence our choices and how...
And government.
And government, and how we've seen over and over again, and we see over and over again, that they trade dollars for health. And that's unfortunate because we're not going the right way. So thank you so much, Alissa, for joining me for our Facebook Live.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure to have you, and I hope to have you back.
It's
again
always
soon.
fun talking to you, so yeah, thank you.
Great, yeah. And for those of you who joined us, or maybe missed part of it, you can always go back and watch the recording here on Facebook, and I hope to see you all again very soon on This Week in the Clinic. Take care and have a good day.